You can't post a photograph of silence, can you? You can't show a bruise that lives inside the body but has never touched the surface of your skin. You can't photograph humiliation served on a plate with a side of laughter. But make no mistake about it, it is still abuse. It's the kind that hides behind good manners and family gatherings, the kind that teaches you to smile while your heart just folds in on itself. This is Annie's story, and I'm telling it for her. The dinner was over, and Annie gathered the dishes while conversation carried on in the dining room. His family had filled the house that day. His parents, his brother, everyone that she had prepared a beautiful meal for. And their laughter was rolling in from the dining room to the kitchen, warm and familiar, but to Annie, it sounded like a warning. She had heard her name mentioned mid-sentence, but not to her. It was about her. Her husband said, "Oh, she's still figuring out how to make the biscuits without burning them." His brother laughed. Mother smiled, trying to soften it, as though maybe she wasn't that happy with the comment. She didn't say anything. And Annie stepped out of the kitchen and smiled too. It's the one she had practiced so many times before. The kind that keeps the peace. She stacked more plates, and her hands were actually starting to tremble at that point, just enough for her to feel it, but not enough for anybody to notice. The room was filled with conversation, and like it should be in a family setting. But to Annie, she felt like an outsider looking in. No one looked her way, nobody asked her anything. I mean, she didn't feel like she was a part of the story. She felt like she was there to be the punchline. She pressed her lips together and whispered, not to anybody in particular, "Excuse me," as she carried the dishes through the dining room to the kitchen. The laughter behind her swelled again. That's how it always went, though. He never yelled in front of them. He never raised his hand. He just raised himself higher by lowering her. Every insult, you might say, was disguised as humor. Wasn't funny. Every silence disguised as a calmness. Anything but calm in that house. She rinsed the plates in warm water, trying to swallow the lump in her throat. She wanted to cry, but she knew she couldn't. That would only cause a scene, and she would be labeled as unstable. But by dessert, she had convinced herself, it's not really all that bad. A couple of jokes at my expense. But then Santino's brother said, "She sure doesn't talk much, does she?" And Santino replied, "Oh, she knows better by now." And there seemed to be more laughter in the room. Annie was standing in the doorway. Of course, she smiled again, because that's what invisible abuse does. It demands silence, it demands performance, and eventually the erasure of yourself. And that's the part that outsiders just don't see. They see a smiling couple hosting dinner. They don't see the power dynamic at play. They should, but they don't. They see restraint and manners, not someone being degraded by someone who's very charming. It just all looks like a fun joke. But, keep in mind, invisible abuse, it doesn't announce itself. It comes in through tone, timing, tiny cuts, sometimes big cuts that bleed internally. It's the joke at your expense that you're expected to laugh at. It's being talked about instead of being talked to. It's knowing the safest version of you is the quiet one. And when you finally tell somebody, and if they ask you, but he didn't hit you, he seems like a nice guy, that's as if pain needs to be photographed to be real. For many survivors, this is the hardest truth of all. You can leave the room, but you can't leave the echo that follows you. You can move houses, change names, and even start over, but it still takes time to learn that your silence doesn't equal safety. Annie did leave, but long before she walked out that door, she had already begun leaving in just tiny little ways, which I think were huge victories. The first time she said no in her head, even if her lips were saying okay at that moment. Because that's how freedom starts, as a whisper that no one else hears. This one's for everyone who smiled through the insult, for everyone who cleaned the kitchen while being erased in the next room, for everyone who's been told at least he never hit you. You don't need bruises to prove that you were hurt. You don't need evidence to justify your truth. And you don't owe silence to anyone. If you're listening and something in you whispered, "That's me," I want you to know you are not invisible and you are not alone. I'm Keil Hackley, attorney, author of the book Undercurrent, and your host here on the Are You Any podcast, where survivors come to be heard and to be validated. As always, please remember that you are stronger than you ever believed. You are a warrior against narcissistic abuse. You are tenacious and you're never, ever going to give up on what's important to you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for always showing up, because it's your comments, your courage, your truth that gives this podcast its depth, its richness, and its value. It was Annie's story who started it, but it's your story that makes it what it is. Thank you. Until next time, promise me that you'll be good to yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.